there has to be an income to repay. When the business is not running, then how will one pay? Now his basic worry was how to pay the 2,200 employees, how to pay their salaries.
Camera person to zoom in. These are the letters that we have accessed here exclusively on Mirror Now, and these are the letters which have been issued to Gitanjali group of companies by the PNB. Mirror Now has accessed a list of willful defaulters across the banks across the country. A shocking number has come to the fore. 1,11,000 crore rupees. This is the total amount of default done by individuals, by companies with the Indian banking system.
We are watching the Urban Debate on Mirror Now. I'm Faye D'Souza. Thank you for joining us. This is the sheet of paper that you just saw on your screen. It runs into hundreds of names of people who are willful defaulters. Now, a willful defaulter is someone who has the ability to pay a bank back, but just chooses not to do so. Someone who has the assets, who has the money, who has the cars, who has the homes, who has the business, but just chooses not to pay. That is a willful defaulter. According to this list, and this is very interesting, gems, jewelry and diamonds, these businesses are among the highest willful defaulters, owing a total of 4,677 crore rupees to banks as of last year. The total list adds up to over 1 lakh crore rupees. Now the question we have to ask is this: if this was a list that is available with every bank in the country of the willful defaulters, if it is obvious on this list that gems and jewelry and people who run gems and jewelry businesses are regular offenders, what was the RBI doing? And why is it the RBI was not more aware, more vigilant, and why didn't the RBI do a better job in highlighting the problem? On the other hand, while there are people who owe 4,600 crore rupees, I want to remind you that the farmers in our country owe an average of 1 or 2 lakh rupees. And they are committing suicide because the RBI governor believes that loan waiver schemes undermines the honest credit culture of our country, and it impacts the credit discipline and disincentivize future borrowers from repaying. So Mr. Urjit Patel, you seem to have very, very strong views about banking and about lending only when it comes to small borrowers who are taking 2 lakh rupees or 3 lakh rupees. When it comes to Nirav Modi and all of his other gems and jewelry friends, you have absolutely no convictions whatsoever. Again, viewers, for the third day in a row, I'm bringing you evidence of the fact that the RBI has been sleeping on the job. And if we have lost 11,000 crore rupees, it's because the RBI was napping. We likely, from this entire list, might lose 1 lakh crore rupees. And these are willful defaulters as of last year. It seems like the RBI hasn't seen this sheet of paper, which is available with almost every bank branch at this point. We can send it to them. Maybe the RBI then can wake up to the fact that the gems and jewelry industry seem to be defaulters, and they should be asking banks to be exceptionally careful when it comes to gems and jewelry. Why is it that our entire system right now is designed to be kind and nice and soft to the rich and to be hard and unfair to the poor? That's the question we're asking this evening. Why has the RBI designed a faulty system? Joining me on the show, G. Chandrasekhar, senior journalist, Avik Saha of the Swaraj Abhiyan, Vipin Malik, former director of the RBI, Vaibhav Aggarwal, spokesperson of the BJP, Ravindra Gupta, joint secretary of the All India Bank Officers Confederation, and Tamal Bandyopadhyay is a consulting editor at the Mint, a widely recognized as an expert in banking matters. Welcome, gentlemen, to this conversation, and I thank all of you for joining us. I'm going to start with Mr. Vipin Malik. Mr. Vipin Malik, do you agree that our system is designed to go easy on the rich, but exceptionally hard on small borrowers and on the poor?
No. No, first let me tell you the willful defaulter definition is that if somebody has been sanctioned the loan and he has diverted the funds, or the loan was given for a project and project has not been put into place. So there is a definition of willful defaulters. Now coming to your question, that whether it is the banking system, it is not that NPA is rising in all the sectors, in all the banks, whether it's a public sector bank or private sector bank. It is whether it's a large accounts, medium accounts, or smaller accounts, or a priority accounts. In a priority and smaller accounts, every 3 years or 5 years, the government gives a write-off, in a sense that they provide the loans, the subsidies to the bank, or one-time payment to the banks. Okay, you write off all these small loans or priority sector loans, and government through its budget allocation give it. Like it was given a few years back, something like 5,000 crores for smaller loans, and also give waiver to loans where there has been a suka, the farmers are dying, or these things happen. And for large accounts and small accounts or medium accounts, whenever economy is doing very bad or not doing, it has been last couple of years we are watching that the regular accounts also becomes non-performing assets, and the banks keep on restructuring those accounts, presumingly that these assets will ultimately come back. So they waive off or give concessions with the understanding that whenever there is a better working of that company, that money will be recouped. So it is not that the whole banking system has gone into that bad, that what the media has started. I think let you accept this fact that the banking in India is doing, except for the few exceptions like what has happened. I am not protecting that. Banking system in India is doing very well otherwise.
Well, let me point out to you, Mr. Malik, also that Yashwant Sinha just yesterday put out an article where he said the Indian banking system has been systematically destroyed over the last 4 years. That may or may not have been a political statement, but I want to bring in Avik Saha of the Swaraj Abhiyan. Avik, is there an irony here to the fact that our farmers...
Let me answer to that. The impeding, yes. The policy impedient of the government is stopping the growth of the banks. Government policy impedient stopping the growth of the bank. Interference in the bank is definitely not helping the banks, but it is destroying the banking sector. So it is in the interest of the government and for the depositors and for the shareholders to denationalize the banks. And
government policy is interfering in banks. That's interesting.
Management controlled by the government.
All right, let me bring in Avik Saha. Avik Saha, is there an irony to the fact that our farmers are in debt, but they're committing suicide? Our rich businessmen are in debt, but they're buying business class tickets to go overseas.
Let's personalize the story. Let's talk about two 46-year-old men. One is Gyanchand, who was crushed under his tractor for not being able to pay a loan of 90,000 rupees. The loan he had taken for the very tractor under which he was crushed. And let's talk about 46-year-old Nirav Modi. He was not only not crushed, he's flying. There's one more fact which the panelist before me, I'm sure he's aware of it. For interest subvention, the government of India promises to pay the banks the discounts in interest that they give for the farm loans. The bigger Modi, Mr. Modi, has not paid 41,750 crores in interest subvention to the public sector banks. So the bigger Mr. Modi is almost 4 times in default of the smaller Mr. Modi. This is one fact that I have not seen being debated in the public fora till now. So overall, farmers who actually represent very little of the non-performing assets, the gross non-performing asset for the agri sector as on 31st March 2017 was 62,307 crore, and that very figure answered in the Rajya Sabha in question 271 for the corporate sector was 8,36,000 crore. I mean, I can't even subtract the amount. So this is what is given away, and for the farming sector, this is what all the debate, all the crying, all the spilt milk is discussed about. The ex-chairman of SBI spoke about the banking, the failure of repayment culture. I want to tell her, madam, you are not paying the farmers for their kidney beans. Now they are left only with their kidneys to sell. Is that what you want? Is that the culture you're trying to promote? Farmers are in debt.
Let me take this question. Let me take this question to Vaibhav Aggarwal of the BJP. Vaibhav Aggarwal, respond to the two statements that were made so far. You have a former director of the RBI saying the government's interference is throttling the banking sector, and on the other hand, you have Mr. Shah who says that this is particularly a system designed to help the rich and literally crush the poor. Respond to that.
Okay. You know, let me respond to the former director, Mr. Vipin Malik, who's saying that policy of government is Empyrean. I think I would like to, personally, in my opinion, it would be great if we investigate his role at the RBI and understand why is he saying that, because I would like to know how much has the government interfered in the past, and I would like to understand how many people has he front-ended from the government side, so as to know what has been the role of the previous regime, you know, in terms of interference.
No, hang on. Nobody asked you about the previous regime. One second. Down some rules. Let me put down some rules. Vaibhav Aggarwal. No, hang on. I'll come back to you. Let me put down some ground rules. There is a reason why we have not brought in anybody from the opposition on this panel, because I don't want to turn this into a political slugfest. So first of all, answer for the government of the day, not for the government of yesterday. Secondly, please do not begin by threatening to investigate all of your critics. Answer the question on the merit of the question. Saying we are going to investigate his role, that's just bullying. That's being a schoolyard bully.
I'm not threatening
That's what you're doing, right? That's what you're doing. Why don't you, as the government of the day, answer for the government of the day?
Faye, that's not right, because I need to understand. I need to understand, Faye. I'm not trying to bully anyone. I need to understand as to, till he was in such role, he never spoke up about the government Empyrean. I would love to see what are his public displays, but however he becomes former, does not get an extension or something. You know, we've been seeing this as a
hang on. That's not fair. Roles. I'm sorry. Yeah. You are not answering the question, Vaibhav Aggarwal. Answer the question for the government of the day. Do not dodge the question.
I feel bad about
by doubting the integrity of the person asking the question. Answer the question. There's been a question that's been asked of you. Answer the question. If you don't want to answer it, say I don't know. That's perfectly acceptable. Because you're not presenting your viewpoint. You are pointing fingers at the person who asked the question. Present your viewpoint. I'll give you time.
Absolutely. Why shouldn't I? I would like to ask the credibility of the person who's presenting a viewpoint.
All right, we're going to move on. We're going to move on from this question and go over to Tamal Bandyopadhyay, because obviously Vaibhav Aggarwal of the BJP cannot be trusted to simply answer a question. All he wants to do is question the integrity of the other panelists. So moving on from Vaibhav Aggarwal, Tamal Bandyopadhyay, consulting editor of the Mint. Do you believe that our banking sector Tamal Bandyopadhyay, is particularly set up in a manner where it is unfair to the poor, or it is tilted towards the rich borrowers?
Well, in some sense, this is oversimplification. I think globally, this is true. It's not India at all. It's not only India. And having said that, we have a repressive financial system. And there are many reasons why banks are not, Main Street banks particularly, are not comfortable with reaching out to the hinterland and giving money to the poor. Because technically they don't have the collaterals, they're all, in most cases they do not have the securities, so on and so forth. And then you have lower transaction, the cost is pretty higher. The the banking system, they, now it is slowly changing because you have the business correspondents are in place, sort of intermediary, and of course technology. But till recently, it was very difficult for the bank. That is their point of view. It's very difficult. It doesn't justify, because the kind of wage you need to pay. For instance, a public sector bank's a branch manager in Mumbai's Warden Road will be getting as much salary as somebody in Gachurali, interior Maharashtra, minus the sort of this gentleman at Warden Road branch will get
So Tamal,
slightly
tell me
more
this.
in terms of city compensatory allowance. So the banks do not have the kind of wherewithal to reach out for various reasons. But I am saying this is little oversimplification. We need to go deeper, the structural issues why this has happened. But it is
G. Chandrasekhar, okay, G. Chandrasekhar disagrees with you. Tamal, I'll come back to you. G. Chandrasekhar disagrees. I can see him shaking his head. I want to go to G. Chandrasekhar. So I just want to point out, I want to talk about this one thing. When someone who has borrowed 2 lakh rupees defaults on a payment, how does the bank treat that person? And when someone who has now at this point borrowed 5,000 crore rupees defaults on a payment, how does the bank treat that person? And why is there such a sharp difference in the treatment, Mr. Chandrasekhar?
Very clearly, I can see that this is a case of governance failure or governance deficit, and this has been going on for quite some time. We heard this term system failure as far back as 1991 during Harshad Mehta's time, and we still continue to hear that 25, 26 years later. And therefore, systems have not been strengthened, leakages still continue, and therefore, this is a failure of governance is number one. You look at oversight, you have internal auditors for bank, you have statutory auditors for bank, you have the Reserve Bank of India, which is the market regulator. What have they been doing all the time? Third, there are some sectors which are extremely sensitive, risky, they are prone and they are susceptible to, say, money laundering, etc. Diamonds are certainly one sector, gold trade is certainly one sector. Shouldn't we not have even much stronger, more severe, more stricter regulatory oversight? Why are we treating diamond trade and gold trade as something which should not have a stricter oversight at all, regulatory oversight? I think there is a complete non-application of mind on the part of the policymakers, on the part of Reserve Bank of India and the entire banking system. The very purpose of nationalization of banks decades ago probably is not serving its purpose, because it was nationalized to serve the Aam Aadmi and to service the poor peasants in rural areas, and farmers are today not able to access bank credit at all, although year after year the target for a flow of bank credit to agriculture keeps rising. Yet a small farmer, a marginal farmer is not able to access credit. And therefore, I think we need to completely overhaul the system, bring in more ethics into the banking system. I think it's at a premium. I'm sorry to be using strong words.
Let's also remember, Mr. Chandrasekhar is absolutely right about the fact that there is a high risk sector in gems and jewelry, because no other bank in the world will lend money against diamonds. It doesn't happen globally. They do not lend money against diamonds, but Indian banks do for some reason. Could that also be because the entire diamond trading industry is based out of Surat, and politically that makes it important? I want to bring in also Ravindra Gupta, Joint Secretary of the All India Bank Officers Association. Mr. Gupta, do you believe that our banking system is unguarded, or the regulations somehow let the rich get away?
No, basically that regulators are there. Reserve Bank of India is the regulator of the Indian banking system, and in the Indian banking system there
Does the Reserve Bank of India know that it is the regulator supposed to be regulating also and not just managing inflation?
No, they are the regulator for the Indian banks, RBI. So
yes, go ahead.
So all the schemes and the operation of the governance has been, some instructions are coming from Reserve Bank of India. And one more thing, that willful defaulters the list that has been drawn in the media, these are the defaulters, those who have taken the loans about 25 lakhs from the banking system. First of all, I would like to say that all the willful defaulters, this point has been raised by our association for a long time, that they should be immediately booked under the stringent norm. They are the people, those deliberately, intentionally not paying the funds of the bank they have borrowed, as well as they have diverted the funds to the other industry or some other purposes, and that's why they are the willful defaulters. And the first, I would like to, from this platform, I would say that immediately their passport must be impounded, that they should not run away from the country. Reason being, after when they leave the country, it's very difficult due to some treaties that to bring back to the Indian system. Now, as per you, this 1,11,000 crore outstanding is there. There is a need to revisit in the last 10-year policies of the Reserve Bank of India as well as the government of India, that what is happening wrong to the Indian system. Now, manpower shortage is there, but and law need to be amended. Like in the case of this, enforcement authorities immediately reacted and they went for the seizure of the assets available to the defaulter who defrauded the bank. And Indian banking system, as on date, it is quite robust. 10 lakh employees are working, more than 1 lakh branches are there. And one point is that risk is the integral part of the any banking and the financial system. These things do happen, and the operational risk is available in the banking, and otherwise the bank will not operate. And credit risk is also there, operational risk is there as per the Basel norms. So these things do happen, and as on date the entire banking industry is on the stake of just because of these things. Definitely there is a systematic failure, and the corrections are really needed to be in this banking sector, and privatization is not a way.
So, Mr. Gupta, do you agree with what Mr. Vipin Malik said, that the government's interference and policy at this point is preventing the banking sector from doing its job?
No, government interference, basically the government is the owner of the Indian banks as on date, and the policy has been designed by that, and they control the Indian banking system. So government interference is not that.
I just want to point out, Ravindra Gupta, that the person who owns the PSU banks is not the government of India, but the taxpayer of India. The government is meant to be a representative of that money and of that taxpayer. So nobody actually owns this. You and I own it. We seem to have had also a misunderstanding of this ownership over the last several years.
No, ownership is decided by the equity who is holding the equity. As on date, the government of India is having the equity in most of the bank, more than 57%. So the ownership vested with them, and privatization of the Indian banking is no solution, if anybody suggests from the media and everywhere. Now the entire growth of this nation, of the country, public sector banks are responsible. After the nationalization, there was a reach of the common man for the Indian banking system, and as a private sector, just let me complete. Private sector lending, it is also reaching to the agriculture. 10% of the loans are available to the agriculturist as on date. But the willful defaulters and the people, those who have taken the big ticket credits from the banking sector, they need to be immediately booked under some stringent law that country must bring in this country. Otherwise, the Indian banking is really at a big risk, and that's why it is harming the reputation of the Indian banks as well as the employees, those are working in this sector.
Okay, so now I'm going to open this up. Everybody's had their opening statements. I'm going to open this up to the entire panel. Gentlemen, just raise your hand if you want to come in at this point. Vaibhav, Aggarwal, there is a need for stringent rules. Who's going to make these stringent rules, if not the Finance Ministry and the RBI? Why is it that the Finance Ministry has not asked stronger questions of the RBI right now? If the RBI is the regulator of the banking industry, shouldn't we be harder on the RBI and the Finance Ministry? Aren't there any questions right now for the government to be asking, Vaibhav Aggarwal?
Yeah, but you said the rule that I can't bring in the past regime, so I better stay quiet on it, because unless I bring in the past regime and share some history with you, you wouldn't want to set the perspective right. So what do I say?
So let me rephrase the question. Vaibhav Aggarwal, we have just noticed the biggest banking fraud in the history of Indian banking. Shouldn't the finance minister of the day be questioning the RBI governor of the day because of what has just happened?
Right. Right. It has already happened. The questioning has already happened. The Honorable Finance Minister 2 days back, Arunji, had made a statement saying that PNB is to be taken to account, and there have been a number of officials which have been arrested in the present day. However, I will not be able to comment on it unless I bring in a past history perspective. So if I'm allowed to bring in a past history perspective, then I would be able to answer your question in toto and in precise manner. Otherwise, I mean, I have very little to say. And trust me, Faye, 5 other panelists besides me have actually said in part in what I want to say. But I mean, I can't set the perspective, right? So that's
so
how
you
much I
can't
can
answer
say.
a single
If you allow me, I
question
can
without
bring
bringing
the
in. So you're telling me, Vaibhav Aggarwal, that you cannot answer a single question right now without bringing in the previous regime.
Because whatever we have in terms of system, whatever failure that has been happening is legacy for us. So I cannot.
So explain this to me. So Vaibhav Aggarwal, explain this. Explain. No, hang on. Explain this to me. 4 years. Hang on, Vaibhav Aggarwal. So let's talk about anything at all. 4 years have gone by. The average term or the maximum term for any government is 5 years. 4 out of those 5 years have gone by, and you are telling me that you are still slaves to what you inherited?
Right.
How is this possible? Aren't 4 years enough to find the problems and solve the problems, which is what a government is supposed to do?
Because, yes.
So for 4 years, what happened? Nothing happened.
Because
for 4 years you have documents like this that 20-year-old reporters are able to get out of banks that tell you that gems and jewelers are the biggest defaulters, and there is nobody either in the finance ministry or in the RBI who said let's take a closer look at everything let's take a closer look at all of the things that the gems and jewelry guys are borrowing. Let's see if we can detect this. But obviously we couldn't, because nobody is paying attention. So which is it? Are we ineffective, or are we corrupt?
Do you want the government to leave everything else that is happening at the policy front and just get into this part of it, or should we try and run this as a parallel function? You know, the government runs many functions parallelly. The government does not focus on one issue and focuses on the other issue, or does not do either of them in silos.
Which is why you have a finance ministry, which is why you have an RBI, which is why you have SEBI. Come on, don't give me a lecture on how government is designed and how government has a lot of work to do. So you don't have the time to pay attention when someone was stealing 11,000 crore rupees from the country. You've got to be joking. G. Chandrasekhar, respond to that, please. Government has other things to do. G. Chandrasekhar,
you got to be joking. You got to give me time.
No, I'm sorry. You can't possibly expect to get away with that. G. Chandrasekhar, go ahead, please. G. Chandrasekhar, government has better things to do. G.
You can't possibly keep the government's perspective in place without bringing in numbers, without bringing in the perspective, and without being interrupted.
G. Chandrasekhar will respond. Mr. Chandrasekhar, please respond.
I think the regulator, Reserve Bank of India, the Finance Ministry, the heads of various large banks, they have to be honest enough in admitting that they have failed in setting very high ethical standards for their respective banks, and that they have failed in plugging the system leakages and system loopholes over the last 25 years. I think I would actually appreciate an apology and an acknowledgement of failure. There are people now trying to defend the indefensible. And this Nirav Modi or Chokshi is probably the latest example. We have had a number of examples in the past, and I'm sure this could possibly be just the tip of the iceberg. There could be many skeletons that may tumble out of the cupboard. We don't know, and therefore let us not wish away anything. Let us not blame anyone else. The present government has been around for 4 years. It must assume some responsibility.
Speaking over Mr. Chandrasekhar.
I really wish you wouldn't.
No,
but let me point out in your favor, Mr. Chandrasekhar did say this is governments of the last 25 years.
This is very funny. Because I think all the loans and all the defaulters are in last 4 years, right? Why don't you see the aging? Why don't you see the default date? The list is with me as well, and there is a date that is mentioned on the list against each defaulter.
All right.
Hey,
all right,
come on,
all
let's
right.
be
Vaibhav
realistic.
Aggarwal,
We are having a debate here, and the government is trying to take parallel actions in terms of policy paralysis that existed during the UPA 1 and the UPA 2. And over the last 50
parallel action?
years, like in
What parallel
1973,
action?
the Supreme Court
What
struck
parallel
the
action?
nationalization of the bank. You have
What
to understand
parallel
that
action?
Rajiv Gandhi era and the Congress went out of their way passing an ordinance to nationalize the bank.
What parallel action has the government taken?
I mean, do we see
What
that?
parallel action
Do we
has the
see that
government
the
taken?
the willful defaulters are all
What
the loans
parallel
that have been
action
given
has the
under
government
policy
taken,
are all
Mr.
under
Aggarwal?
RTA, right? I mean,
All right.
isn't that
What
funny?
can Mr. Vaibhav Aggarwal, can you even hear me, or are you ignoring my voice altogether? Can you hear me? Is this a sound check for Vaibhav Aggarwal? Can
I'm
you
not
hear me?
ignoring that. I'm trying to make a point.
All right. So my question to you, since you were giving us a history lesson and said the government is doing parallel action right now, what parallel action is the government doing in the banking sector to tighten the screws on the leaks that you Mr. Chandrasekhar has pointed out has been around for the last 25 years? So he's actually arguing on your side that this has been a problem for the last 25 years.
Okay,
I want
so
to know
if
in
I
the
get an
last 4 years,
opportunity to speak,
what
I'll be able to
steps
say
have
that.
we taken to solve that problem? And then the rest of my panelists will respond to the steps that we have taken to solve that problem. Go ahead.
First of all, we look for the systematic corrections in the system. We should look what further
honestly-
we have to do. This is a major point, and these frauds should not reoccur. This is another point.
You know, I'll sit on the debate like a pretty face. I have no problem in doing that.
And moreover,
Yes, Mr. Gupta, go ahead.
Moreover, the one point I just want to bring in your notice that all the public sector banks, the boards are not complete. There is a provision of the workman director and the officer director, employee director on their boards. For the last 3 years, no appointment has been made. As on date, all public sector banks are without the director as per the statute. There is an act, there is a provision, and these people have been working as a watchdog or what policies are being made in the boards of the bank. So immediately those things, those has been totally, I mean, there are the lapses or the irregularities, those are happening in the banking system, need to be plugged immediately. This is one of the point, and the manpower shortage is another point in this banking sector, and other products are being sold through the banks. Now the bankers are deviated from their core banking activities like the credit, deposit, and many cross-selling products are being imposed on the bankers, which is not warranted the parallel verticals can be made to sell those schemes around the banking. But the last 10 years,
Yes.
definitely there is a need to
Let me-
relook and revisit the policies of the banking sector. This is more important as on date.
Mr. Vipin Malik, how much policy improvement or what kind of policy improvement have you witnessed in the banking sector over the last 4 or 5 years?
Let me give 3-4 clarifications here. One is that you were talking about the willful defaulters. To the best of my knowledge, that as and when anybody becomes a willful defaulter, any company or individual or a firm becomes willful defaulter, the Reserve Bank instruction is that immediately to file a criminal action and a criminal recovery case against him. So all those willful defaulters, you are talking about 1 lakh crore, 11 lakh crores, all, I mean, in the best I understand, all banks must have filed the criminal actions taken criminal actions against them. Second, on the operational part, what my predecessor speaker was saying, that it is a fact that there have been no appointment of the qualified directors in the banking system. Even earlier the rule was that a chartered accountant a director chartered accountant will be the chairman audit committee, which was changed by earlier regime or
The
this
funny
regime, I
part
don't
is that
remember,
everyone wants us to
but
bring in
definitely
reform and
changed,
they're all
but
citing
it has
earlier
not
rules.
been corrected even by
Don't they
this
have
regime.
anything fresh to talk about? And then I'm not being allowed to
So
share the perspective. I mean, come on, this is a joke, isn't it? Let's talk
Please,
about
I
the last
apologize,
4
Mr.
years.
Vipin Malik.
Well,
When
I have
there were
never
rules
said
and you
that
want us to amend the rules,
it was
then
earlier
you know,
regime.
when we
I
amend the rules,
said
No,
you
I,
want
I, I apologize,
I-
Mr. Malik.
yes.
Vaibhav
Yeah,
Aggarwal,
you should
please
know.
allow him to
You
finish
should know
making
that
his
there's
point
no
and you
appointment
can-
of the directors.
But when we
I
want
mean,
to talk
you
about
see,
amendments in the
see
public
that
sector
if
banking
the directors'
reforms,
appointments
like
have not been made, how the
recapitalization,
bank
which
is
one
going
of the
to
biggest
run?
reforms to
Even
save the
the
economy
chairmen
from
have
going
not been
down.
appointed
I
for a
mean,
couple of months.
you don't want to
can't-
want to talk about
I
that.
can't say
You want to talk
argue
about
like
what government interference
and counter
is there in the
argue.
system.
Vaibhav,
I mean,
You want to
Vaibhav
talk
Aggarwal,
about
please
more
allow my
about
guest
saying
to speak.
something.
Vaibhav Aggarwal.
Of course.
You
all
keep
the
on
list of the
talking.
willful
I will
defaulters
not-
have come out.
I will not
After
respond.
This government, the present
Vaibhav
government, the Modi
Aggarwal,
government has
Vaibhav
instilled
Aggarwal,
transparency
please calm
measures
down.
and tightened the nose around the banks. We can't be a child's class where we are monitoring the functioning of these large private sector banks or PSU banks. They have to be governed by a single policy window. There can't be special treatment for banks which are public sector or banks which are private sector. We can't be making competition that tough. Hey, come on.
What are you
There so
talking
much
about?
that we are already doing.
Vaibhav
That's
Aggarwal, did
the
someone just
first
send you a
time
text
in
message that you
independent
didn't have
history
full time
that
to
we are
read?
only-
Because
show me one debate
Vaibhav
in past
Aggarwal,
10 years that has happened
Vaibhav Aggarwal,
around willful
what are you
defaulters.
talking about?
And Faye, you're a senior journalist. We've got Mr. Chandrasekhar, who's a senior journalist. We've got Avik, who's an experienced professional here. I would like to know, when was the last time we all sat together and had a debate in the public forum like this?
What?
And these are the reforms we're talking about, that the information about these guys are naming and shaming in public. These are the reforms, these are the policy paralysis that the Modi government is actually breaking. These are the policy paralysis that the Modi government is trying to change, and thus everyone is trying to corner this government because we're tightening the nose and trying to recover the taxpayers' money. Hey, I'm a taxpayer, you're a taxpayer, all of our panelists are taxpayers. We would want to recover our funds. We would want that to go into
Avik
education.
Saha, do you want to
we would
respond
want
to
that to go into farmer welfare. $2.1 trillion have been put into farmer welfare this budget. Anyone has an account for that? I mean, hello, telling the government, telling that citing previous policy was this government has not cited previous policy, so the new directors have not, hey, we're trying to change the new policy, bring in a new policy, and that is the reason we are holding on to the appointments perhaps. Have you ever thought like that?
brief is very clear.
Perhaps.
You know, it's
All right.
easy
Live in
to-
the
Alright,
past.
anyone on the panel who wants
You
to
become a
respond to
I
Mr.
want to.
Aggarwal? Mr.
I want
Aggarwal,
to
we've heard you
respond.
out. Calm down,
This
take a
is-
breath, wait for
and bringing
responses.
the perspective
Vaibhav Aggarwal, if you don't listen to me, Vaibhav Aggarwal, audio check for Vaibhav Aggarwal. Vaibhav Aggarwal, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Vaibhav Aggarwal, Vaibhav Aggarwal, don't make me scold you like a school teacher. Can you hear me, Vaibhav Aggarwal? Please stop.
However, we can't be the monitor of the class. The banks have a total responsibility.
All right, I'm going to have to. I apologize to my viewers. I don't normally do this. I don't reduce the audio on a mic, but I'm going to have to because none of my other panelists can get a word in. Tamal Bandyopadhyay. Tamal Bandyopadhyay. I'm sorry. Tamal, go ahead. Tamal, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to make, allow me to make 3 points, very clear 3
Yes.
points. I am neither a
Yes.
politician nor do I represent a trade union, so I don't have any vested interest. Point number 1 is this: we need to break the back of corporate and bankers nexus. This is nobody will admit officially, but this is the problem in India, and all the fraud, willful defaulters, and the overexposure to gems and jewelry, and the arbitraging between import credit and local domestic credit, so on and so forth. Everything clearly indicates that there is a corporate banker nexus in whichever way you look at it. This is a system, and we need to break we need to break it. I don't care about which government, etc. I think it's the responsibility of the Reserve Bank of India. And I think to some extent Reserve Bank of India has started by, when it started in 1995, AQR, Asset Quality Review, when it said that, look, I don't trust your numbers, I will send my inspectors and check. And that's how the which was very low non-performing asset, over a period of time it started coming out of the closet. So, and then very recently, I think early this month, it also said that no more hiding, no more in a denial mode, you have to clean up your balance sheet. I don't care where you get the money from, so on and so forth. Is this enough? Probably this is not enough. We need to be even more aggressive. Does this condone that Reserve Bank of India, is extremely active and it should not take any responsibility for what has happened here? I am not I'm not saying that at all. I am not holding candle for the regulator. But what I am saying is this: we need to break this nexus, which is very clear. I mean, what you have seen probably is not the true story. I know for sure, being a part of, I know what exactly happening. There are many established banks which continue to give loan to their corporate borrower just to pay back, which you call evergreening. Have they been caught? Not yet, but probably they will get caught now. So that's point number one.
Tamal, tell
point
me
number
something.
two is
Tamal,
this.
tell me something.
I hear your BJP representative. Yeah.
Is it likely that Nirav Modi is not the only one, that 11,000 crore rupees is not the final amount, that we are going to discover, if we truly look, we are going to discover many more problems like this, because obviously somebody was gaming the system. There could have been other people doing the same.
No, in different format, maybe I don't say that there's a contagion and you will see many more this kind of LOU, letter of undertaking scandal and kind of stuff. I'm not saying that. I don't think there's any contagion, but it is happening in different format. Second part, I am reacting to this BJP gentleman is saying we should have simple rule for all the banks. Unfortunately, this is not the case. And this is one of the big problems in India is this: our regulation is not ownership neutral. What does that mean? Reserve Bank of India have different set of rules for private banks and foreign banks, and different set of rules for State Bank of India, other nationalized bank and RRBs. Can it sack a chairman? It cannot. Can it appoint a chairman? It cannot. Can it appoint a board? It cannot. Can it sack a board? It cannot. Even though these banks are listed, do they follow the independent directors norm, which is the SEBI prescribed listing norm? A certain percentage of your board should be independent directors? No, because they are all, because they are this ownership comes from the way. If you see that Banking Regulation Act, which is the omnibus act for the entire industry, is not applicable or is selectively applicable to the state-run banks. So the state-owned banks, very critical, some of the critical portions, they are not applicable. So if I am a state-owned bank, I will not be very careful about what the regulators say, because I know that there is an owner. I can always go back to Department of Financial Supervision, DFS, and I can figure out how to wriggle out that. So that's second part. I think privatization is a tough call because of the politics involved in it. But what we can do is this: have the same rule and regulations. Regulation should be ownership neutral. In fact, if you remember, the PJ Naik committee has categorically said that we need to have regulation ownership neutral. And finally, I think this fraud, however alert you are, be the government, be the regulator, somebody will game the system. In fact, if you see the Nick Leeson thing is happened in 1995, the entire Bearing Bank collapsed. 2008, you have Societe Generale, this French gentleman, the future trader Jerome K. He was involved in euro 7.11 billion. So comparatively, this is a relatively smaller amount.
Let me just also bring in Aviksa. Let me bring in Aviksa. But can you eliminate fraud? Can you eliminate? 1 second, Tamal. Let me just bring in Aviksa as well. And what Tamal is saying is very clear. He said some very clear things. First of all, he said that right now there is a severe nexus between bank officials and corporates. Money is being circulated. There are banks that are actually lending to corporates to pay back a loan that they have already borrowed. They're just money that is being circulated that just never pops up in the system. So obviously there is a problem, and he's answered several of the questions raised by Vaibhav Aggarwal as well. But I want to go to Mr. Saha. Aviksa, what is your response to this nexus right now between banks and corporates and the fact that our regulator has not managed to catch it?
Tamal Babu has alluded to the truth, but not the complete truth. Very big loans in this country are all political loans. Once upon a time, I used to be a corporate lawyer. I know exactly who you need to know if you are a businessman to be able to access very large loans. Corporate banker nexus is for 3-digit loans. For 4-digit loans, the banker has no authority. Though that's the elephant in the room. And that has to be talked about. And that, yes, Vaibhav is correct. That has been happening forever. But for Vaibhav, he must also remember that his party cannot live in the past be clueless about the present and talk only about the future. He must also know that his finance minister has acted on this.
I agree.
He was in the public domain saying that he has asked the auditors to introspect. I don't know what that means. Privatization. I'm sorry, I'm unable to agree with Mr. Malik, because the large bank collapse in the West have all been private bank collapses. So privatization is not a panacea. We keep talking about it whenever we face a crisis, as if that's going to save us all. Sorry, history is completely different. So overall,
you know, and I want to take this question now. One second, I want to take this question now to Mr. Vipin Malik. Mr. Vipin Malik, and this is a suggestion that just Ravindra Gupta made and Tamal Bandyopadhyay tweeted this morning, that basically willful defaulters should have their passports highlighted so they are not able to leave the country. Do you think that this is an idea that the government should, or the RBI should consider?
As I already said, that as per the instructions of the Reserve Bank, all willful defaulters, immediately criminal cases has to be filed. And now it is the court to decide whether the passports have to be retained or not retained, because it is not in the hand of the bank also. It is in the hand of the courts. Courts are the final authority. And I don't see any reason for courts not passing such orders. That if there is chances of running away, then the courts will immediately ask to surrender the passport. There should not be any problem. But it is the courts who have to take the call. Finally, so far as the privatization part is concerned, what I am saying is that let the government take 50% of the equity, but give away the operational part. As Mr. Bandyopadhyay was saying, the Reserve Bank has no power. I mean, though the Act says that they have all the powers, even superseding the management or the board of any bank, but in actual fact, that is only possible if the government agrees to, because government has the power. So 50% equity with all operations, operational power to be given to either the shareholders, which are 50%, and they can hold 50% plus one share. So whenever there is something going wrong, they can use that golden share. That is my suggestion. Rest up to the public of India to decide, because ultimately it is the taxpayers' money, as you rightly said. The ownership is with the taxpayer through the President of India and through the Government of India.
Let me respond to one thing. Hello.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. See the fate of the private banks in India, Global Trust Bank, what happened? Times Bank, what happened? 20th Century Financial Limited, what happened? Lakshmi Commercial Bank, what happened? And the old generation banks, Catholic Syrian Bank and Karur Vyasya Bank, these were the private banks. And what change will be made in the operational by the private people? Basically, if the government is not able to run, do you think that government people will run it much better way? And the society, the public sector bank as serving as on date.
Hang on. Wait, Ravindra Gupta, this list of defaulters that I'm holding up, maximum list of defaulters everybody knows is with public sector banks. There's obviously, and PNB is leading the list. So obviously there is a severe problem with public sector banks.
No, public sector bank has been serving to the society, and they are in large number. Almost entire nation, the entire country, from a poor to the top man, has been served by the public sector bank. Private sector bank, as on date, are serving to the only selective people. You will find out. Even today, the major population of countries are afraid to go
Mr. Malik wants to answer. Right, Mr. Malik wants to answer. Mr. Malik, go ahead.
Let me answer this, because he named some of the bank failures. Let me also give the answer to that by saying that 17 banks, which include State Bank of India, PNB, IOB, Union Bank of India, 17 banks have market capitalization as on today of 4,15,000 crores, whereas HDFC own market capitalization is 4,87,000 crores. Why we are only looking to the failed banks? We should also look into the HDFC Bank.
So which
After
segment,
they have also
sir,
performed,
which segment of
they have
the
crossed
country
the market
the
capitalization
HDFC Bank is serving?
to the 17 banks.
Are they in the agriculture and the rural sector, which is the major population of this country? Have they made any agriculture? As on date, if I can correct you, that agriculture budgets they have completed by ancillary activities. They have, if they are any of the, just a minute, any of the borrower or any of the customer is manufacturing anything which is related to this, then they are completing the targets of the agriculture finance in this country. And the norms for agriculture finance are different for these private sector
Yes.
banks. As on
Yes.
date, you were in the Reserve Bank of
Yes,
India.
they do that.
So do you think that private banks will serve better to the major gamut of this country, the population that is living in the rural areas? Only public sector banks are serving to the SME sector, rural sector. Then the cream of the population and the cream of the business has been handled by the private sector bank as on date.
Right.
So privatization.
Okay.
is
I know.
not a-
I know. Vaibhav Aggarwal wants to come in and say something. Vaibhav
One
Aggarwal,
sentence,
go
Faye,
ahead.
One sentence. It's a clincher.
Okay.
One sentence. The
Very
chairman of
Faye,
Punjab
please,
National Bank.
I really respect the points that have come in for. You know, this is a very complicated, gentlemen, 1 minute. This is a very complicated
Vaibhav, one thing, the chairman of the
situation for
Punjab
us
National
as a
Bank
government.
was brought in from
We've
the
come in
private
at a time
sector
where the economy is, where the
because the
economy
See, all
private
of
is
you
sector
both
was
speaking at the
so
same time. I
looking
can't
at
understand
growing
you when you do
the largest in the world. We've come in at a time where we have certain policies, draconian policies to deal with. So the kind of way we are trying to work is, for example, we've introduced IBC, which is the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. We've brought in the Banking Regulation Amendment Act of 2017 that covers a lot of regulations, and we will be bringing in forth more regulative policies. We cannot tweak this system on one shot because this is dealing with the economy. It is on a very, very delicate scale. You little this side and you're done. You little this side and you're done. You know, what do we do as a government?
You
We
didn't
gotta
feel that
keep
about
patient, we gotta move
demonetization?
slow. Of course, some things like these, the 11,000 crore is shameful. This has to be checked immediately. One moment, gentlemen, don't be a rush. Okay, this has to be checked, and we as a government are committed to check this. However, we still can't stop this in toto till we do not bring in policy amendment, and policy amendment by the virtue of the policy, the governance perspective has to go slow. It cannot be put on a fast burner like a supercharger. It can only be put in on a charger. It cannot be put in on a turbo. We have to understand a little this side you're done, a little this side you're done.
Can I
and
pay
our
my
expert
taxes
panelists
for the
would
next
agree to
year
what I'm
also
saying.
in installments? Because, I mean, since we're losing a lot of money right now and the horses have bolted, and you're saying that closing the stable doors are going to take time, which means that more horses are going to bolt. In the meantime, we're going to lose more money. I would prefer if I only pay 10% of my income tax next year.
Checks.
So that, you know, you don't lose all of it. If you lose 10% of my income tax, I'll be a little more comfortable with it. Let's put it, I'll give you post-dated checks for the rest of it. I don't want to give you my income tax. If you're going to lose the money and you're telling me you don't have the ability to actually stop the money from bleeding out of the country because it takes time. I'm willing to give it time.
No, we
you,
did
you
say,
should give me time as well.
That. We'll not lose this money. We're going to get it back. And that's a commitment that we've given to people since the time this story is broken on.
Vijay
On the
Mallya.
Times News Network. Vijay
Mallya.
I
have two words for you. Vijay Mallya.
We will bring this money back.
These are such beautiful fairy tales.
Right.
They make
Vijay
you so
Mallya
happy.
made an offer for repayment of about 500 million pounds, which is about 6,700 crores, which is a process by the virtue of law to settle with the banks, with the lender. Now that's up to the banks and the consortium and the legal strategy to take place. The government is looking into it. There is a bridge that we are forming, but it takes time. We cannot be held responsible for loans that have been given in the
that's the
previous
way forward.
Okay, so
I mean,
so let
give
me
us
reverse the
that
question.
opportunity.
Vaibhav
We are
Aggarwal,
trying to
let me
do that.
reverse the question. Okay, hang on. Vaibhav Aggarwal, let me reverse the question. What can we hold you responsible for?
We are responsible for the governance of the country, and we will come out with flying colors when we go back to polls next year. And you will see that. There's so much policy paralysis that we have to deal with right now. It's not an easy job, trust me.
All right, fair enough. All right, I'm going to give one last word to Mr. G. Chandrasekhar. Mr. G. Chandrasekhar, unfortunately, this always becomes a political thing. It's not a political thing. The problem is that we have a huge regulatory problem in our country.
Absolutely.
I
in fact,
just
this
want to
debate
say-
actually has
that we
triggered
cannot have
new thoughts and
a
new
situation like
fears
in
in my
USA.
mind. We are now discussing that banks will be allowed to trade commodity derivatives. My worry is over the last 30-40 years, banks have lent money to brick and mortar projects and have accumulated huge amount of NPAs. And they are supposed to know how about project appraisal, etc., etc. They have no clue about commodity market. They have no clue about commodity derivative. And if they are going to play with public money in commodity derivatives, I don't know. I think the NPAs can swell even further and bigger. I think we need a complete overhaul of our banking system, including the regulatory oversight. I don't know. I think there are no easy answers, but we keep saying that this is a slow process. It will take time. 25 saal nikal gaya hai. The first bank, first scam that involved banks was as far back as 1991. If my memory serves me right, what have we done in 25 years?
What have we done in 25 years? That's a very good point. I'm going to wrap up this discussion here. Because we've run out of time, but we're going to continue to examine this because it's a far bigger problem than we would let on. Unfortunately, viewers, this is turning into a political discussion. It's not a political discussion. This is a problem that we have had for 20, maybe 25 years, and successive governments have failed to solve the problem. What we have is a banking system that has rats in the basement, and the rats are eating all the money because it's so corrupt at this point that we have bankers who are feeding corporates who are taking money out of the system. Consider the fact that when you don't pay your phone bill, your phone gets cut off. When you don't pay your electricity gets cut off. Your television will go off if you don't pay your subscription. But somehow for the rich in this country, there is absolutely no check. They've started a brand new version of the Quit India movement where they take money out of our banks and they run away. There's a huge problem. We need to be able to set aside the politics and say there is a problem in the RBI, there is a problem in the banking sector. Let's fix this problem. It's not about the politics. It's not about who's in power now and who was in power earlier. Everybody has failed collectively. And if we don't accept that we have a problem, we won't be able to solve it. On one hand, a farmer is killing himself for 3 lakh rupees, and on the other hand, Nirav Modi chilling in New York with all our money at this point, your money and my money, because no one will hold him accountable. We have to accept that this problem lies in our system. We have to accept the RBI has failed. The finance ministry must bring the house down on the RBI at this point. Urjit Patel must be forced to answer, and he must offer the citizens of this country our money he's lost. He must offer us an answer as soon as possible. We continue to demand an answer here on Mirror Now from the RBI and from its governor, Urjit Patel.